What is going on, everybody? Thanks for joining me back on my channel, Brutus on Baseball. I'm making this video today just to wrap up the Hall of Fame season. We got the voting results this last Tuesday. Joe Mauer, Todd Helton, Adrian Beltre all getting in 2024. But I wanted to quickly step through all the voting results and just touch on each player and some thoughts about each one. And in addition to that, there's this thing that I've wandered upon that I didn't really know about called the YouTube channel Hall of Fame. This is a group of guys that are all baseball card collectors, it seems, for the most part, and they've made a Hall of Fame of YouTube channels that have been around for at least 3 years. And to be eligible to vote, you have to be a content creator that's been making videos for at least 1 year. And so those voting actually know what it takes to be able to put these videos together and make consistent videos on a regular basis. And so I decided, why not put a video out there with my own votes of baseball channels that I'm a little bit surprised haven't made it to the Hall of Fame yet. And I'm going to put those votes at the end of this video. And for Legends Never Die, I did put down below the ones that I'm voting for, so you don't have to watch the whole thing if you don't want to. All right, let's get started by looking at the actual Baseball Hall of Fame voting results for 2024. All right, here's the 2024 voting results. Let's check this out. We'll go top to bottom just to make it simple. 2024 Hall of Fame voting. Adrian Beltre, first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. He deserves to be in. 95% of the vote for a guy that has 3,000 hits and almost 500 home runs. It's kind of surprising to see this so low, but historically speaking, it's actually a pretty high vote percentage. Todd Helton. I am so happy that Todd Helton made it into the Hall of Fame, and I was really worried based on his low number of vote flips that he had obtained prior to Tuesday that he wasn't going to make it this year, and I am so ecstatic to see that he did. Very deserving in my mind, one of my favorite players growing up, and after having gotten 72% last time, it was almost a guarantee that he was going to get over 75% this year. I was really worried, but I'm glad I predicted this one and got it right. And the third guy that did get in, Joe Mauer, and he barely squeaked in with 76% of the vote. He was actually tracking higher than Todd Helton in the pre-announcement voting tabs, and a lot of people thought that he was going to sail in, but he actually didn't get as many votes with the private voters, dropping his percentage about 7% to 76 and just squeaking in. This was a surprise to me. I did not expect him to get in on the first ballot. I thought it would take at least 2, maybe even 3 ballots before he got in, and the looming candidacy of Buster Posey was probably going to be what it takes to get him over the top. But he got in on his first ballot. A lot of people say that he didn't deserve it. In my mind, I would have voted for Joe Mauer, and here's the reason why. Both his traditional stats and his analytics, his WAR, WAA, show that he was borderline, somebody that did not have necessarily a slam dunk case for the Hall of Fame. But he was a catcher for the first decade of his career, and that means something. The reason why is it's the one position on the field where you play every single day, and it takes a physical toll on your body and ability to keep competing at a high level. Some players can do this for an entire career, like Ivan Rodriguez or Carlton Fisk for a very long time, but some guys break down and can't keep doing it, and Joe Mauer was one of those guys, mostly because of concussions that he sustained while playing at the catching position. And for that reason, I think the bar needs to be set a little bit differently for catchers, or else we're not going to have very many catchers getting voted into the Hall of Fame. Mauer was one of the best catchers in his generation and one of the best hitting catchers of all time. 3 batting titles and an MVP at the position. So I've seen some people comparing Mauer's numbers to other guys like Don Mattingly or Steve Garvey. Those guys were first basemen for their entire careers, whereas Joe Mauer may have finished at first base, but he started at catcher and played the majority of his career at catcher. So those numbers have to be treated differently. Now, coming up next, we got Billy Wagner here. Wagner got 73.8% of the vote, only 5 votes shy of getting elected into the Hall of Fame. Now, if we look at his last year's vote total, we see that he got 68%, so he got bumped up by about 6% of the vote, and that's pretty good. He's got 1 year left. This was his 9th year. Next year will be his 10th year on the ballot in his final try, and I think it's pretty obvious that he's going to be getting in next year. We just need a couple guys that have been reluctant to vote for him as a reliever to change their minds and decide to put him over the top. But you hear it here, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, whether it's next year or Veterans Committee, so we might as well make it next year. Gary Sheffield is the next guy up. 64% is where he ended up in his final 10th year on the ballot, and he's dropping off, not to be seen by the writers again. And this one to me is very unfortunate. For whatever reason, it took a long time for much support to be given to Gary Sheffield. He was lost in the shuffle of the ballot with a lot of really deserving players for his first 5 or so seasons, and he's been slowly creeping up ever since then. For example, last year, he ended up getting 55% of the vote, and before that, he was down in the 40s, 30s, even 20s for a lot of his years. This year, he jumped up from 55 to 64, so a 9% rise, but it was too little too late. I've said this before, he is one of the most misunderstood players, and somebody who loves to comment on a lot of my videos said this week that of all the character flaws that you may think Gary Sheffield has, one of them is not lying. If anything, he's too honest and too good at telling the truth, no matter what it is. He doesn't care what you or anybody else thinks about him. And he has come out recently vehemently denying any association with PEDs outside of working out with Barry Bonds for a couple weeks in that fateful offseason. Do I believe him? Absolutely, I believe him. I don't think he needed it to be a great hitter, one of the most feared hitters probably in the history of the game. And you didn't see any spike in numbers at any point in his career. He was consistently good throughout his entire career at hitting the ball and didn't have any arc like Barry Bonds did where he got really good at the end of his career. I hope that the Veterans Committee treats Gary Sheffield really well and votes him in, but it really could go either way. I wouldn't be surprised if no one votes for him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in on the first try with the Vets Committee in 2026. We're just going to have to wait it out and see, but I really hope that he does get in someday. Moving along, Andruw Jones, 61.6%. Again, we look back at his previous balloting results. He got 58% last year, so he crept up a little bit, about 3.5%, but he's also been creeping up throughout his candidacy, and I think he's going to continue doing so. We'll see. There might be a group of guys that just won't vote for him, but it seems like every year he converts a few more at a time. And there's a lot of guys that voted for 10 people and would have voted for Andruw Jones if they had more room. And with Helton, Mauer, and Beltre not being on the ballot next year, maybe they'll be able to find room for him. I think he will end up getting in by the Writers Association at some point, but it could be his 9th or 10th year on the ballot. Beltran was a really interesting case. If we look at Beltran's vote total last year in his first year, 46.5%. This year, he bumped up to 57, so a 10.5% increase. I was a little bit surprised to see such an increase for Beltran. This tells me there's a lot of guys that weren't willing to vote for Beltran in his first ballot, but they're actually willing to consider him more in future ballots, despite all of the cheating scandal that he's been involved with. We'll see if this continues to climb. Next year is going to be a pivotal year for him. If he jumps another 10 percentage points, I think it's pretty obvious he'll likely get in, but it'll be interesting to see if the voting body sees him differently than PED users, which I find kind of confusing and surprising. PED users, even if you're using, you still got to go out and hit the ball and play against other players that were likely using the same substances. But people aren't seeing Carlos Beltran, one of the veterans of the Houston Astros in 2017, in the same way it seems, and they're giving him a lot more votes early on in his balloting. Maybe it's not that different though. There were a lot of other teams that were doing similar things to steal signs and cheat in the game of baseball during the same time period. The other teams just weren't stupid enough to bang on trash cans to make it so obvious. But again, let's see what happens Beltran next year. That's going to tell us a lot more. A-Rod and Manny. A-Rod, I think, got 35% last year. He's like just under that this year. Manny got 33%. He's just under that as well. They both dropped a little bit. They're obviously not going anywhere, and I don't think they're going to go anywhere until Bonds and Clemens get into the Hall of Fame. If you're not going to vote for Bonds and Clemens, who had no suspensions, there's no way you're going to vote for Manny and A-Rod, who were suspended multiple times. I have a feeling we're going to see these numbers stagnating. Manny's got 2 more tries. He's going to fall off the ballot pretty quickly. A-Rod has still 7 more tries, but I doubt that he's going to get over 40% at any point. Chase Utley is a really interesting one. I was expecting somewhere around 15 to 20%, and it's surprising to me that he got almost 29% in the vote. This is still a huge drop from the pre-announcement ballots that were put out into the public, where he was trending between 40 to 50% for most of that time. And that would have been very surprising to me to see him finish with that number. 28%, 29% is still higher than I would have expected, and that tells me that maybe Chase Utley has more of an opportunity than I thought. I thought he'd be one of those guys that would languish on the ballot somewhere between 15 to 30% for all 10 years, but who knows? We'll have to see how it goes, but it's a better start than I anticipated. Moving on, I think we're at the point where these guys are never going to make it through the writer's ballot. Omar Vizquel has this host of issues, a lot of accusations in the past, even though the domestic abuse charges I think were dropped, and then there was a sexual assault case of some sort with an autistic bat boy that was settled out of court. And he's done some PR campaign to try to repair his image, but I just don't think it's going to happen. And on top of that, to me, he just was not a Hall of Fame talent type player. And so in my mind, this is actually where he should have been all along. And I expect him to stay under 20% for the most part for the rest of his time on the ballot. Bobby Abreu, Jimmy Rollins, Andy Pettitte, Mark Burley, all of these guys, we've seen their numbers hovering somewhere about 10 to 15% for the most part. And they've been dropping a little bit as people have been giving their votes to other players and not finding space for these guys. I expect that to continue to be the case. I don't think any of these guys were good enough to have that late ballot surge that a lot of guys like Helton and Andruw Jones and Billy Wagner have had. Really great players, but not Hall of Famers. Francisco Rodriguez, 7.8%. Torrey Hunter, 7.3%. Two guys that I wouldn't be surprised if they end up falling off the ballot at some point in the next few years. Certainly not going to get enough support in my mind. David Wright is the last guy that's going to continue onto the ballot next year. I was really happy to see him continue on to the second ballot, simply because this guy was a Hall of Fame player for his entire career and just wasn't able to continue it because of a variety of physical injuries to his body. If he had been able to keep playing into his 30s at the level that he was, no doubt he would have been a Hall of Fame player. And David Wright may not make it past the second ballot, but it's just great to see. And it's better than 10 years ago when the ballot was so jammed with great players that we had so many fall off right after the first ballot, like Kevin Brown, Johan Santana, Jim Edmonds, Kenny Lofton, just to name a few. These are guys that had better careers by far than David Wright, but didn't get to see a second ballot and didn't get their candidacies considered for more than 1 year just because of how many great players were log jammed on the ballot at that time. The rest of the guys that we're not going to see going on: Victor Martinez, Jose Bautista, Bartolo Colon, Matt Holliday, Adrian Gonzalez, and even Brandon Phillips ended up with a few votes. Some of these guys getting recognition, and to me, it would have been Adrian Gonzalez that I would have given a vote for if I could have, just a token vote, because of how much I enjoyed watching him hit with the Padres, Red Sox, and finally Dodgers. Finally, Jose Reyes and James Shields, congratulations for making out on the ballot. Sorry you didn't get a vote, but it is a great honor to even have a career that gets you on this ballot to begin with. All right, so that's my rundown of the results themselves. Let's switch gears and talk about YouTube Baseball Channel Hall of Fame. These are guys that have been making videos for at least 3 years. And a lot of these guys are ones that I looked to when I first started. I'm still fairly new to this YouTube thing, so I haven't explored a lot of different channels, but these are a couple that I've found to be a really great resource over time. And I wanted to give them this shout out because I think they deserve to be in that upper echelon of great YouTube channels, specifically for baseball card collecting. The first one is an easy one for me: Scotty B Cards. Scotty B, I think, does a great job making content on his channel that appeals to modern collectors. He's definitely got that modern focus, which not everybody does, but that's one thing I kind of like. It's helped me to learn a lot more about modern cards, whereas my focus was usually vintage or kind of that 90s, early 2000s era. So thanks, Scotty, for providing a lot of great videos, and definitely get my vote. Next guy up is Neo Cards and Comics. This is one of those guys that does a ton of videos, a ton of content all the time. I think he appeals to the wider audience, but he may not appeal so much to the vintage collector, the diehard collector. But to be honest, he just does a great job of putting out regular content with the latest update in the card collecting world, and I've appreciated that. So Neo gets my vote for sure. Next one up, baseball card collector, investor, dealer, in that order. This guy does a great job as well, and he's got a great following as well, 65,000 subscribers. That definitely says something about who he is and the content that he has to share. Next one up is this guy, Rated Rookie. I've only recently found him, but I've really enjoyed watching the videos that I've been watching, and I think he has some great content to provide to the people out there. Almost 2,000 subscribers, so if you don't follow him, go check it out, give him a follow. I highly recommend him. Next guy up is Dead Guy Cardboard. He hasn't made as many videos in the last year, but I still find his catalog quite interesting to look back at, And he has been coming back and making a few videos in the last few months. So again, 3,500 subscribers, go check him out. And then the last guy I'm going to mention is a little bit polarizing in the hobby, I think, because Victor, the rookie card specialist, cares a lot about the rookie card designation and what it means in the hobby. He's got some strong opinions, but I happen to agree with a lot of them, being a rookie card collector in the 90s and 2000s. He may turn a lot of modern collectors off with his stances and his messaging, but for me, I think he's a great source of information, and he cares so much about the hobby of card collecting. I think it's worth a look. He's got just shy of 2,000 subscribers. Go check him out. Whether you agree or disagree, he provides a great entry point for conversation. So those are my votes. Thanks again for joining me in this Hall of Fame season. I'm wrapping it up with a bow in this video, and I won't talk Hall of Fame again until next off season. In the meantime, keep talking baseball, take care of yourself, and we'll see you around.